42 minutes before my sister was supposed to walk down the aisle, I was sitting alone at a 24-hour diner outside Austin, watching her wedding live stream on my phone because she had personally told security not to let me through the gates. The camera drifted across rows of white chairs beneath old live oaks. A string quartet played beside a limestone terrace, and my mother sat in the front row wearing a silver dress I had paid to have altered 2 weeks earlier. Riley looked perfect in every photograph that had already appeared online, exactly the way she had planned. The adored youngest daughter marrying Owen Mercer, the only son of one of the richest real estate families in Central Texas. I was stirring cold coffee when my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. A man's voice said, "Morgan Hale?" I knew who he was before he introduced himself. Charles Mercer had a low, controlled voice that sounded like someone accustomed to asking questions only when he expected an answer. "This is Owen's father. I need you to listen carefully. Did you sign a limited power of attorney giving your mother authority to mortgage the Fredericksburg acreage your grandfather left you?" My spoon stopped against the side of the mug. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. "No," I said. There was silence on his end. Then paper moved. "Did you authorize anyone to pledge that land as collateral for a $1.6 million bridge loan connected to Mercer Vista?" I stood so quickly my knee hit the table. "No, absolutely not." Another silence, longer this time. Through the live stream on my phone, I could see guests taking their seats. The officiant was already standing near the altar. Charles lowered his voice. "Then we have a serious problem." I looked around the diner as if the answer might be sitting in one of the cracked vinyl booths. "Mr. Mercer, my sister banned me from that property yesterday. Your security team has my name on a do not admit list." "I know," he said. "I also know why now. Do not call Riley. Do not call your parents. Come to the service entrance on the east side of the venue. Bring whatever proof you have that the land is yours and that you never signed this document. My counsel will meet you there." I stared at the tiny image of my sister smiling beneath an arch of white roses. "Why are you asking me this 40 minutes before the wedding?" Charles exhaled through his nose. "Because the final lender package came back this morning, and our title attorney noticed something that should have been caught 3 days ago. Your name is on a document that could cost you everything you own, and my son is about to marry the woman whose family delivered it to us." I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt sick, because 36 hours earlier Riley had called me an embarrassment, taken our grandmother's blue enamel brooch off my dress, and told me to get out before anyone important saw me. I had thought that was the betrayal. Sitting in that diner, listening to the father of the groom tell me someone had pledged my land without my permission, I realized being excluded from the wedding had been the smallest part of what my family had done to me. The day before, I had driven from Austin to the Mercer family's hill country estate, believing I was going to my little sister's rehearsal dinner. I was 28, 3 years older than Riley, and I had spent most of my adult life being the dependable one in a family that treated dependability like an unlimited credit line. I worked as a title analyst for a regional real estate company, which sounded boring enough that my father used to introduce me as the paperwork daughter. Riley had laughed the first time he said it and never stopped. She was prettier, louder, better at walking into a room as if everyone had been waiting for her. I was the one who remembered when our parents' property taxes were due, who drove my mother home after outpatient surgery, who covered the electric bill when Dad's equipment repair shop had a bad month, and who wired Riley $1,400 when her apartment deposit came due because she had spent her savings on a girls' trip to Cabo. None of those things had seemed important until I stopped doing them. My grandfather, Everett, was the only person in the family who understood why I loved records and maps. He had spent 40 years surveying ranch boundaries before GPS made half his tools obsolete, and when I was a kid, he taught me how to read a plat map at his kitchen table. When he died, he left me 22 acres outside Fredericksburg with a small stone house, a dry creek, and a stand of live oaks he had protected from developers for 30 years. He did not leave it to my parents. He did not split it between Riley and me. He left it to me because, as he wrote in a letter tucked into his old field notebook, You are the one who understands that land remembers who kept faith with it. My father hated that decision. He never said he hated me, but every discussion about the property ended with the same question. What are you going to do with 22 acres, Morgan? My answer was always the same. Keep it. Riley hated the answer even more after she met Owen Mercer. Owen was not a prince, but in the part of Texas where we grew up, the Mercers might as well have been royalty. Their company restored historic commercial buildings, built luxury communities, and owned enough land around Austin that people recognized the family name on construction signs. Riley met Owen at a charity gala through a friend and became engaged 14 months later. Suddenly, my parents stopped complaining about debt and started talking about family opportunities. Dad bought a new truck. Mom started taking weekend trips to Dallas for dresses. Riley's social media transformed into engagement portraits, private tastings, lake house weekends, and captions about building a legacy. I assumed the Mercers were paying for most of the wedding. I was wrong, but I did not know that yet. When I arrived at the estate for the rehearsal, I wore a navy dress and pinned my grandmother's small blue enamel brooch near my collarbone. She had worn it to every family wedding I could remember, and after she died, Riley and I had both wanted it. Grandma had left it to me because I was the only granddaughter who visited every Sunday during her final year. Riley noticed the brooch before she even said hello. She came through the bridal cottage with 2 bridesmaids behind her and looked me up and down as if I were a vendor who had wandered into the wrong room. "Why are you wearing that?" she asked. "Grandma's brooch?" I touched it. "Because you're getting married." Riley's expression tightened. "That should be mine today." I thought she was joking. "You can borrow it for the ceremony if you ask me like a normal person." She reached out, unfastened it herself, and stepped back before I could stop her. "There, problem solved." One of the bridesmaids looked away. I held out my hand. "Riley, give it back." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Morgan, please don't start. I have one day where this family is finally being taken seriously." "What does that have to do with stealing my brooch?" Her smile disappeared. "This is exactly why I didn't want you here." That sentence landed harder than the theft. "What are you talking about?" Riley shut the cottage door behind her bridesmaids and lowered her voice. "Owen's family is polished. Their friends are judges, investors, university donors. And you walk around correcting people about easements and tax parcels like some county clerk who got lost at a gala. I'm a title analyst. See? You can't even hear yourself." She looked at my shoes, my dress, my hair. "You make everything feel small. Dad finally has people respecting him. Mom finally looks like she belongs somewhere. I am marrying into a family that matters. And every time you're around, you remind everyone what we actually come from." I remember staring at her because the cruelty was so direct that I had nowhere to hide from it. "I helped pay your rent for 2 years. And you never let anyone forget it." "I've never mentioned it to Owen." "You don't have to. You carry yourself like you're keeping a ledger on everybody." She picked up a white envelope from a vanity table and pushed it into my hand. Inside was a printed hotel reservation in Austin for that night, and a note from venue security saying my invitation to the rehearsal and ceremony had been withdrawn. "I don't want you at the wedding," she said. "Please don't make this uglier than it already is." I asked if Mom and Dad knew. Riley gave me a look that answered before she spoke. It was Mom's idea to handle it quietly. I still went to find them. Some part of me needed to hear them deny it. I found my parents near the catering tent reviewing place cards. When I told them what Riley had done, Mom did not look surprised. Dad rubbed his forehead and said, "Morgan, just give your sister one day." She took Grandma's brooch and removed me from the wedding. Mom sighed. "It's something blue. She'll give it back." "And the wedding?" Dad glanced toward the main house before lowering his voice. "The Mercers are sensitive about appearances. Riley is under pressure." "So I'm the appearance problem?" Neither of them answered. That was the moment I understood there would be no rescue. My mother finally said, "You have always been independent. You don't need this the way Riley does." I looked at her for a long time. "You mean I don't need a family?" She flinched, but Dad stepped in. Don't twist words. Go back to Austin. Let the weekend pass. We'll talk Monday. I left without yelling. I drove 40 minutes before I had to pull into a gas station because my hands were shaking too hard to keep the truck straight. If you've ever been the daughter who gets called strong whenever everyone else wants permission to hurt you, you know exactly what my mother's sentence meant. They had decided my ability to survive was the same thing as consent. That night I checked into the hotel Riley had booked for me, but I never slept. At 6:17 the next morning, my work phone buzzed with an automated property monitor alert. I had enrolled my grandfather's acreage in the county's notification system months earlier after our company handled a case involving deed theft from an elderly homeowner. The alert said a new instrument referencing my parcel had been indexed in Gillespie County. At first I assumed it was an appraisal notice or a utility filing. Then I opened the image. The top of the page read, "Limited Power of Attorney." My name was typed beneath it. According to the document, I had appointed my mother, Diane Hale, as my attorney-in-fact for the specific purpose of conveying, encumbering, financing, or otherwise utilizing my Fredericksburg property in connection with a commercial transaction. My signature was at the bottom. It looked close enough to fool someone who did not see my handwriting every day. It was not mine. I read the document twice, then a third time, because my brain kept trying to turn it into something less dangerous. The notary acknowledgement was dated 4 days earlier. 4 days earlier, I had been in Houston at a title conference. The power of attorney had already been used. A second recorded document showed a deed of trust securing a $1.6 million loan against my acreage and another parcel my parents owned outside Dripping Springs. The lender was a private bridge finance company. The borrower was an LLC I had never heard of called Hale Heritage Partners. My mother had signed for the LLC using the fake power of attorney, and the loan referenced a larger development called Mercer Vista. I felt the room tilt. I called the only person I trusted with both the law and my panic, Lena Ortiz, my college roommate and now a real estate attorney in San Antonio. She answered on the third ring with sleep in her voice. "Morgan, somebody better be dead." "Not yet." I emailed the documents while I was talking. Her tone changed before she finished reading the first page. "Did you sign this?" "No." "Did you authorize your mother verbally?" "No." "Did you give anyone a copy of your driver's license?" "My parents have old copies from insurance paperwork. Riley probably does too." Lena went quiet. "Do not call them." "I was about to." "Don't. We need to know what this was used for before they know you've seen it." I drove to her office in San Antonio because staying alone in the hotel suddenly felt dangerous in a way I could not explain. By 8:30 we were sitting in a conference room with the recorded documents spread across a table. Lena ordered certified copies, contacted the title company listed on the deed of trust, and sent a preservation notice instructing them not to destroy emails, identity documents, or closing records connected to the transaction. I called my employer's compliance director because my name appeared on a commercial loan I had never disclosed, and I wanted the fraud reported before a credit agency or licensing review found it first. That was the difference between my life and the fantasy my family had apparently built around me. I could not wave my job title like a magic wand and fix everything. I could only make the next correct call before someone else made the wrong one. By 10, the first piece came back. The $1.6 million had not gone directly to Riley or my parents. Most of it had been wired to an escrow account connected to the Mercer Vista project, a luxury mixed-use development Owen's family planned to announce after the wedding weekend. My parents had represented Hale Heritage Partners as a family investment company contributing land and capital to the project. On paper, the Hales looked like serious partners. In reality, the only valuable asset they had contributed was land they did not fully own, using authority I had never given them. "Why would the Mercers agree to this?" I asked Lena. "They probably believed the paperwork," she said. "A recorded power of attorney exists. The loan funded. Your parents own a second parcel. If nobody had a reason to question your signature, the deal could look legitimate long enough to close. But why now?" Lena tapped the wedding program I had dropped on the table. "Because your sister isn't just marrying Owen. Her family is entering a business venture with his family. That's why they suddenly needed to look like investors." My stomach turned as Riley's words came back to me. Dad finally has people respecting him. Mom finally looks like she belongs somewhere. I whispered. They used my land to buy their way into his family's project. Lena did not answer, which was worse. Around noon, the title company's counsel returned her call and confirmed the loan was only the first stage. The final Mercer Vista construction facility had not yet funded. It was scheduled to close the following Monday, and my acreage was listed as additional collateral supporting the Hale contribution. If the fraud were proven, the entire capital stack would have to be reworked. That explained why nobody had called me yet. My family believed they had enough time to get through the wedding, finish the documents, and deal with me later. It also explained why they wanted me away from the Mercers. I knew property records. I knew which questions to ask. I could have destroyed the arrangement with one conversation. At 12:40, Lena obtained an email from lender counsel that shifted everything again. The message had been sent by Riley 2 weeks earlier. I watched Lena read it, then slide the laptop toward me without speaking. Riley had written, Morgan is difficult about the family property, but me mom has full authority now. Please do not contact her directly because she is emotional about Grandpa's estate and may confuse the process. Attached to Riley's email was the forged power of attorney. I read that sentence until the words blurred. I had spent the morning hoping Riley was merely selfish enough to enjoy money she did not understand. The email proved she knew there had been a problem with my consent and deliberately told professionals not to speak to me. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not Mom and Dad trying to help one child at the expense of another. My sister had helped build the wall around me. By mid-afternoon, we had enough to stop the Monday closing, but Lena refused to let me turn it into a revenge performance. This is where people ruin good cases, she told me. They get angry, post everything online, threaten everyone, and suddenly the evidence becomes part of a circus. We are not doing that. She filed a formal fraud notice with the title company and the bridge lender, then contacted the county clerk about the disputed power of attorney. My employer documented my report and temporarily froze any internal conflict review pending investigation instead of suspending me. I should have felt safer. Instead, I felt hollow. Riley's wedding was still happening. My parents were still smiling in photographs. Owen still had no idea, as far as I knew, that the woman he was about to marry had helped hide a fraudulent property transaction from her own sister. I asked Lena, "Do we tell him?" She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "We tell counsel. We let them decide how to handle their client." That answer frustrated me because it was correct. At 4:10, Charles Mercer's attorney acknowledged Lena's notice and requested the certified deed records. At 5, he asked for proof I had been in Houston on the date of the notarization. My airline receipt, conference badge scan, hotel invoice, and a photograph of me standing on a stage during a panel discussion were enough to establish that I could not have appeared before the notary in Fredericksburg at the time stated. At 6:30, counsel requested a call with Lena. I was not included. At 7:15, Lena came out of her office and said, "The Mercers know there is a problem. Does Owen know? I don't know. Does Riley? Not unless someone told her." I hated the idea of going to bed while my sister celebrated at the rehearsal dinner, but Lena made me promise not to contact anyone. I drove back toward Austin and stopped at the same diner where, the next morning, Charles would eventually call me. That night, I ate half a grilled cheese sandwich and watched my phone fill with family photographs. Mom had posted a picture of Riley beneath a caption about 2 families becoming one. Dad was standing beside Charles Mercer holding a whiskey glass. There was no mention of me. I almost laughed when I saw it. My absence had been edited so cleanly from the weekend that a stranger would assume Riley was an only child. Then a text came from my mother. It was the first communication since they told me to leave. "Hope you're calming down. Riley has a lot at stake. Please do not embarrass us by contacting the Mercers about family matters. We will work something out after the honeymoon." I stared at the words, "a lot at stake," and wondered whether she had intended the pun. I did not reply. The next morning, the wedding live stream began at 11. I watched because I needed to see whether anyone had actually stopped the transaction or whether wealthy people would decide paperwork mattered less than keeping a ceremony on schedule. At 11:18, Charles Mercer called and asked the question that changed the day. "Did you sign this deed?" By 11:30, Lena and I were driving to the estate with a folder containing certified records, my travel evidence, the lender correspondence, and Riley's email. We entered through a service road, not the flower-covered front gates. No royal guards, no private jet, no crowd turning to stare. A woman from Mercer Council met us beside the catering kitchen and took us into a small library away from the guests. Charles was there with his wife, Owen, and two attorneys. Owen still wore his tuxedo. His boutonniere was pinned perfectly to his lapel, but his face looked like someone had just told him the floor beneath the house was hollow. Charles did not accuse me of anything. He simply placed the power of attorney on the table and asked, "Is that your signature?" "No." "Were you ever asked to contribute your property to Mercer Vista?" "No." "Did you know your parents had formed Hale Heritage Partners?" "No." "Did you know Riley sent this document to our lender?" I looked at Owen before I answered. "Not until yesterday." Lena handed over the email. Owen read it without moving. Then he asked me something nobody in my family had bothered to ask. "Why would she tell them not to contact you?" My throat tightened. "Because she knew I would say no." The room went silent. Owen read the email again. He asked his father's counsel if there was any legitimate explanation. The attorney said there might be facts they had not yet seen, but the closing could not proceed and the recorded authority appeared seriously compromised. Owen stood up. "I need to talk to Riley," Charles said. "Not alone." Owen looked at him. "Dad, I'm not discussing my marriage through counsel." Then he turned to me. "Were you really removed from the wedding?" I nodded. "Yesterday afternoon." "Why?" I could have repeated every insult Riley had given me. Instead, I said, "Because she was afraid I would embarrass the family she wanted you to see." Owen's expression changed in a way I still remember. It was not anger yet. It was recognition. The ceremony was delayed 23 minutes. Guests assumed it was a dress problem until Owen walked alone to the altar and spoke quietly to the officiant. I watched from inside the library on a small security monitor because I had no interest in marching into the crowd and becoming part of the spectacle. Riley appeared at the far end of the lawn with my grandmother's blue brooch fastened to the ribbon around her bouquet. For a second, I forgot the forged documents and saw only my little sister at 8 years old, stealing frosting from Grandma's kitchen while I tried to keep her from getting caught. That memory hurt more than anything she had said to me. She reached the front and immediately knew something was wrong. Owen did not take her hands. The music stopped. He leaned toward her and said something the microphones did not catch. Riley's face changed. She shook her head. Owen spoke again. She looked toward the house, then toward her parents. Mom stood up. Charles gestured for her to stay seated. Finally, Owen turned to the guests and said, "I'm sorry, but there will not be a wedding today. We have discovered a serious matter that has to be resolved before I can make the commitment I came here to make." A murmur moved through the chairs. He did not announce fraud. He did not humiliate Riley by reading documents into a microphone. He simply removed the one thing she had believed was guaranteed. Riley did the rest herself. "This is Morgan!" she shouted. Even from inside the house, I could hear her through the monitor. "She did this. She has been trying to ruin me because she can't stand that I'm happy." Owen said something I could not hear. Riley's voice rose again. "My mother had permission. Morgan changes her mind constantly. She told us we could use the land. That lie ended any possibility that she had innocently forwarded paperwork." Owen asked, clearly enough for the microphone to catch it. "Then why did you tell the lender not to contact her?" Riley froze. My father started walking toward the altar. Charles met him halfway. What followed was not the dramatic public trial Riley later claimed it was. Security escorted my parents and Riley to a private room. Counsel explained that the financing was frozen and the property documents were disputed. Owen gave Riley multiple chances to explain the email. She kept changing the story. First, she said Mom told her Morgan had agreed. Then she said I had agreed years earlier. Then she said Grandpa would have wanted the land used to help the family. Finally, she said the sentence that killed whatever sympathy Owen had left. It's 22 acres she barely uses. Why should one person get to hoard something that could change all of our lives? Owen stared at her and said, "Because it's hers." Riley looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time that weekend there was no contempt in her face. There was fear. "Morgan, tell them this is family business." I almost laughed. Instead I said, "You made it business when you borrowed money against my land." Mom began crying and said they had planned to replace the collateral after the Mercer project funded. Dad insisted nobody would have lost anything. Lena asked him to stop speaking because every explanation made the situation worse. I walked over to Riley and pointed to Grandma's brooch. "I want that back." She touched it reflexively. "Seriously? Right now?" "Yes, right now." For 1 second, I saw the old dynamic returning, Riley deciding what mattered and expecting the rest of us to adjust. Then Owen reached toward the bouquet, removed the brooch himself, and placed it in my palm. He did not make a speech. He simply said, "This belongs to you." I closed my fingers around the cool enamel and felt something inside me settle. The wedding was over. The financing was frozen. My parents could no longer hide behind the ceremony, and my sister could no longer call theft a family favor just because she wanted the outcome. The next several months were slower and less cinematic than people imagine when they hear that a wedding was stopped over a forged property document. That slowness mattered because it was where the real consequences lived. The bridge lender filed its own fraud report. The title insurer opened an investigation. The notary whose stamp appeared on the power of attorney admitted during questioning that my father had brought the document to him already signed and told him I had executed it earlier. The notary had acknowledged a signature he never personally witnessed. He lost his commission and cooperated with investigators. A district judge later declared the power of attorney invalid and voided the lien against my Fredericksburg acreage. The lender pursued my parents and Hale Heritage Partners for the money instead. Riley was not marched off in handcuffs on her wedding day. She hired a lawyer. So did my parents. The criminal case moved through the system slowly, with document requests, interviews, hearings, and negotiations. My father eventually pleaded guilty to offenses connected to the false instrument and loan application. My mother accepted a plea for her role in signing and submitting documents she knew I had not authorized. Riley's lawyer argued she had relied on what our parents told her, but the email instructing the lender not to contact me was impossible to explain away completely. Her case ended with probation, restitution, obligations, and a permanent record that mattered far more to her than any public embarrassment at the altar. Owen never married her. He met me once afterward, months later, at a coffee shop in Austin, because he wanted to apologize for not asking more questions before his family's project accepted the Hale contribution. I told him the same thing I had finally learned to tell everyone. You didn't owe me protection. My family owed me honesty. Mercer Vista went forward the following year without my property, after the Mercers replaced the financing and cut all ties with Hale Heritage Partners. My land stayed mine. I repaired the old stone house and moved into it part-time. I kept my job. There was no miraculous promotion, no seven-figure consulting contract, no crowd suddenly recognizing that I had been secretly extraordinary all along. What changed was quieter. I stopped paying my parents' bills. I stopped explaining why. When Mom called and said family should not abandon family, I told her, being my mother never gave you ownership of my name. When Dad asked if we could eventually put this behind us, I said, I can forgive you without giving you access to me. Riley did not speak to me for almost a year. On the first anniversary of the canceled wedding, she mailed me a plain envelope containing a handwritten apology. It was not perfect. She still wrote too much about pressure, about wanting to belong, about believing the Mercer marriage would fix the way our family felt about money and status. But one sentence was different. She wrote, I treated your stability like something I was entitled to spend. I kept that letter because it was the first time anyone in my family named the real crime accurately. The forged paper had been illegal, but the belief behind it had existed for years. They believed the responsible daughter could always absorb another cost. They believed the quiet sister could always survive another insult. They believed my land, my credit, my time, and even Grandma's brooch were family resources until someone else wanted them more. I had helped teach them that by saying yes too often. A year and a half later, I was sitting on the back porch of the Fredericksburg house while Lena grilled chicken badly enough that my grandfather would have come back from the dead just to take the tongs away from her. The blue brooch was pinned inside a shadow box in the living room beside his old field notebook. I did not wear it much anymore. I did not need to prove I had recovered it. Through the yard, I could see fresh survey stakes marking the corner of a small two-room office we were building near the road. Lena and I had started hosting free Saturday clinics every other month for homeowners who received suspicious deed notices, especially older people whose children handled their paperwork. I showed them how to enroll in county alerts, how to read a recorded instrument, and how to ask one simple question before signing anything involving land. What authority does this document give someone else over me? Lena handled the legal questions I could not answer. We never called it a foundation or turned it into some grand public mission. It was just something useful we could do with knowledge I already had. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the live oaks, Lena handed me a plate and said, "You know the funny part? Riley thought getting you out of that wedding would make her life look cleaner." I smiled. "It almost worked." "No." It made the missing person obvious. I looked across the acreage my grandfather had trusted me to keep. For most of my life, I had confused being needed with being loved. My family needed me when a bill came due, when paperwork confused them, when Riley wanted help, when Dad's business struggled, when Mom needed a ride. The moment my presence became inconvenient, they treated me like an embarrassment. Lena had never needed me to shrink so she could feel important. She had simply shown up when I called and asked, "What happened?" Then believed the answer long enough to help me prove it. That difference changed the way I understood family. I still loved my parents. I still loved Riley in the complicated way you can love someone you no longer trust, but love stopped being a key they could use to enter every locked room in my life. Sometimes the strongest thing a daughter or sister can say is not, "I forgive you," and not, "I hope you suffer." Sometimes it is simply, "This is mine, and you don't get to take it." My name was mine. My work was mine. My grandfather's land was mine. My future was mine. And once I finally understood that, I stopped waiting for the people who had used me to tell me what I was worth.